Have you ever gone outside and looked at the moon, and then gone outside a few days later and noticed that the moon had changed? Well, that's a different phase of the moon. It changes. And that all has to do with how the Earth and the moon and the sun relate to each other. Let me show you. If this is the Earth and this is the moon, you see that the moon orbits around the Earth, and that when we get sunlight from one direction, it hits the Earth, and then the Earth casts a shadow upon the moon, creating the phases of the moon that we commonly see, like the crescent moon, or the new moon when it's completely covered, or a full moon when there's no shadow at all. Now, science is always about trying to find patterns and trying to figure out how things work. And this is done mainly through the scientific method, which involves starting with a hypothesis, this idea that we want to test, and then followed by conducting an experiment. We come up with this experiment in order to test this hypothesis. Then we draw a conclusion based on the experiment, and sometimes we change the experiment and we change our hypothesis based off of this until we can gather the information that we're looking for. So, let's say we want to figure this moon thing out. We want to look for a pattern. Is there a pattern with the phases of the moon? So think about that as you're doing this. So when we do this, we're trying to come up with this idea, this pattern that we're trying to find. So let's say our hypothesis is the moon changes phases in a predictable pattern. How are we going to test this? That's what I want you guys to think about. So what we need to do is we need to conduct an experiment. We need to come up with a way that we can test our hypothesis. So some of the ways that we can do this. We can chart the phases of the moon as they change on a daily basis. And this is something that I want you guys to try. We'll have you go home and go out every night looking at the moon. And then, so say you go out tonight and you see it, and then you go out the next night and you observe it again. Well, you can observe it and see if maybe it's changed at all, but you need to be able to compare that to something. So I want you to think about, how are we going to compare this? How can we record this information? So the best way that we're going to do this is by making a chart and then drawing the picture of the moon as we see it every night. So you'll go home, draw a picture of the moon one night, and compare it to the pictures of the moon the next and the following nights. So there's one important thing to think about when we're conducting an experiment. It's called variables, or something that varies, or something that changes. These things are what scientists are always trying to get rid of when they're conducting an experiment, because it tends to hide the pattern and make it less easy to see. So when you're conducting these experiments, we got to think about the variables that we're trying to eliminate, make it a much more complete and precise experiment for us. So as we're doing this, you're going to notice some stuff. So here's an example. If I go outside at 8 o'clock and draw a picture of the moon, and then the next day I go outside at 9 o'clock and draw it, and then the following day I go outside at 10 o'clock and draw it. Well, the time of day changes, and so the pattern and the time increments in between these pictures of the moon changes, actually, just even by an hour. So this has the potential to alter our pattern. So what we're trying to do as we conduct this experiment is to eliminate as many variables as possible. So if we get rid of this difference of time of day, it would look like going out at night at 8 o'clock one day, and then going out at 8 o'clock the next day and the following day. So now we go outside at 8 o'clock every day, and we've eliminated a variable. So what I want you guys to do is think about these variables that are going to interrupt and be possibly involved in our experiment. So I want you to go out for the next couple of days, look at the moon, draw pictures of it. We're going to get a chart, make up a chart, and we're going to do this for a whole month. And then in a few days we'll talk about the variables and see if we can eliminate some more to get a more direct picture. And then after a month of all this charting, we're going to be able to see if there's any patterns there. We're going to be able to conduct our experiment and to test our hypothesis to see if there are any patterns in the phases of the moon. So thank you.